Welcome to the Educational Leadership Moment. Today, we have a very, very special guest. We are blessed to have Gretchen Barron, lead consultant of G Barron Consulting, a firm that helps organizations seek guidance on starting, growing, and optimizing their businesses. Gretchen is also the remarkable author of the 4G Factor. Now, you might think that guts, grit, grind produces greatness is just another catchy phrase, like Nike's Just Do It. But for Gretchen, it's a way of life. You see, her book isn't just a self-help guide. It's a transformative lifestyle for those who are ready to commit to growth and excellence. And you know, on our podcast, that is our focus. How do we grow and achieve excellence every single day? Gretchen is also a proud South Carolinian, holding a degree from the University of South Carolina, which for those of you that do not know South Carolina, the University of South Carolina is the flagship university for the state and the proud home of the Gamecocks. Now, Gretchen's career has spanned roles that are very diverse, from educator to state administrator for the 21st Century Community Learning Centers program, and assistant director for program development and grants at the South Carolina Department of Juvenile Justice. She is also consulted for the U.S. Department of Education and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. Now, you would think with the many roles and responsibilities that Gretchen has on her plate, that she would say the plate is pretty full. But that's not Gretchen. So in 2020, Gretchen decided that she needed to become a servant to the people. How did she do that? I know that's what you're wondering. Well, she ran for a public office and was elected to the Richland County Council representing District 7, where she has been instrumental in rebuilding trust and driving economic progress. So despite her many roles, Councilwoman Barron cherishes her role as a mother to the Barron boys, James Lionel II and Hilton Chase, as her most important role. So when she's not being the lead consultant in her firm, writing fabulous books, being a councilwoman representing our community, she is also serving as a mother and cheering for the Gamecocks, which is the team that she loves. So I hope that in our conversation today, you're going to find that Gretchen's journey has been inspiring and powerful when we discuss the factors behind the 4G factor. So would you join me in giving Gretchen Barron, Councilwoman Barron, a warm, warm welcome? So Gretchen, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Good, Dr. Moore. Thank you so much for having me. It's just an honor for me to have this audience with you. I watch your podcast quite regularly, and so to be a fan and now to be a participant is a great blessing.
Well, Gretchen, if we're fangirling, I'm a fan of yours. I am just so impressed with what you do every single day. Because being a public servant, I don't know if people really realize how much time, effort it takes. It's not just showing up for your monthly meetings. It's the work that you have to do behind the scenes to ensure that you're prepared to address the issues that the community that you represent are bringing to your attention. In addition, you are setting budgets and policies for the entire county, for everyone in that county that the board serves. Layer on top of that the work that you do in your consulting firm, as well as writing a book and being a wonderful wife and mother. I just don't understand how you can find the time to do all of that. That's a lot.
It is, but what I'll say is that God gives us the grace to do the things that we need to do. And oftentimes I have an out-of-body experience, and sometimes even looking at my social media platform and my different posts, and I'm like, wow, how did you do all that? This is crazy. But I believe that God has graced me to be able to go in and out of the spheres of influence that He's trusted me with. And because of that, I don't take it lightly, but I know that it's definitely, if I did not have the grace of God on my behalf and working for me, I don't know that I could do it. But I know that when we're called to do something, it's not a task. It's not a task, and it makes it a lot easier for us to be able to, go in and out of these spheres sweatlessly. Because, when I wake up in the morning, someone told me, said, when you get up in the morning, it's like you just dart out the bed and you don't stop until you dart back in the bed. And really, that's how I live my life. So when I hit the floor in the morning, I'm 100. I'm 100, but I want to give it 100 for all the things that I have to do that God has entrusted me with, because at the end of the day, it's not about what people say here, what people will say on and on. But for me, it's what people say here on earth. And then once I go to heaven, because I'm planning on going there, I want them to say, well done. Well done. And so that's what I work for. And I make no apologies about, my religion or how I got here, because I understand that if it had not been for God, I wouldn't be here. Because all statistics say Gretchen D. Barron should not be doing the things she's doing.
Well, Gretchen, that is a great lead in, because as a woman of faith also, I know God orchestrates and orders my steps, and He gives me that grace too to do what He's called me to do. And so you talked about putting your feet on the floor and just hitting the ground running. Can you tell our listeners about yourself and your book, The 4G Factor? Because where did you find the time and the energy to write this book? That's phenomenal.
Yeah, well, you hit on all things, Gretchen Barron, in the introduction of myself. But what's most important to me is my Barron boys. I love and cherish them. There's nothing too great or too had to have a little family meeting last night and remind them of some things. But I love being their mother. I love, my youngest son, we affectionately call him Prez, and he's on the football field. He's in on the basketball court. He's trying it all. And it's exciting to see him, grow into this young man. And then I've got one that's celebrating the 19th birthday today. And just watching him grow into a man, sophomore in college. And so at the core of who I am, I'm those boys' mama. And that's the most important task for me. Business owner, yes, indeed. Serve Richland County Council, yes, indeed. But in every fiber of what I do is you'll hear, in politics, they call them a slogan. They call them your mantra, and then there is, I say, I'm here to serve. And I come from a family of servants. I come from a family of servant leaders. And when I think about my grandfather and how he served our community and how he served our church, that was just ingrained in the fiber of who we are as a family. And so it just becomes, almost second nature to say that I'm a servant. And what I've learned, even, as I speak about my grandfather, one of the things he used to joke and tell me all the time, girl, you're going to mess around here and be somebody. You're going to mess around here and be somebody. And I work hard every day, not necessarily to mess around here and be someone, but to know that if he was still living, that he would be proud of me and the path that I've chosen. And God has blessed me to have a tremendous life and to have some tremendous success. I've got some challenges and some stories, some more stories I could also share. But with that, what I found is that people don't talk about how they got here. And it's only lonely at the top because we don't bring anyone with us. And so I have decided that I would not be lonely at the top, but I bring people with me. And that's how this book came about. I was in a leadership class and they said you had to come up with a motto using only one word. And so I came up with gut, grit, grind produces greatness. And that became my motto. And I think that was early on, maybe in the early 2000s. And that just kind of became my motto. And I noticed that whether I was journaling or whether I was praying, I would get little nuggets about how to move forward with the gut and the grit and the grind. And then I guess maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, I decided, hey, I'm going to write a book. Well, then life happened.
I know that feeling.
And, life happened and I was like, okay, I'm not writing a book. I got other things to be worried about. Let me just get myself together. And the late Senator John L. Scott, the former senator that was for District 19, I have this journal that I would go take with me, and it was my 4G journal, and I left it in his car. And he said, I got your little book. There's some good stuff. You should write a book. And I said, oh, Senator, I'm done with that. This is just my journal. And he died unexpectedly. And in him dying unexpectedly, as I began to, go through the grief process, one of the things that I thought that I would do would be to pen this book and to honor him. But one of the things that I learned from his leadership was while he was a man, he understood the challenges that many women face. And so it was always his plight for life to make sure that if he could promote women, he would promote women. If he could appoint women judges, he would. And so I decided then that women, we need someone who's done these things before and to be able to, tell us, hey, no, girl, don't do that. Girl, try this. And I dedicated my book to women, although many men are reading it and love it. And that's really, how the 4G came about.
Oh, that is awesome. I love that role your grandfather played in your life, because my grandfather was a significant part of my growing up and inspired me to where I am today in my career. So you talked about his inspiration and the reason that you wrote this book. Can you share some specifics from your journey that has led to the guts, and why you say guts, grit, and grind?
So one of the stories I tell early on in the book, and the great thing that I love about the book, and the one thing that God gave me when writing the book, was to make sure to use my life as a case study, because a lot of times people will say, they'll tell you all the things you need to do, but they don't give you any examples, or they'll give you examples of someone else. Like, I heard this or I heard that. Well, no other great example than to say, this happened to me. And experience doesn't necessarily have to be your best teacher if someone else has already gotten the stripes. So with that, one of the stories I tell is that I remember getting laid off from the Department of Juvenile Justice, and that's how I became a business owner. I had a consulting business, and I was doing some grant writing and some staff development training, just kind of being bivocational, still working full time, but just doing the consulting. And when I got laid off, it was, it was a time where I was married then. And when I was married then, we made the decision that I would work my business full time. But remembering at the same time, I want people to note that I was successful at what I was doing. So being successful meant that people paid you well. And now to go from a very nice salary to zero, and literally, as the Bible says, I had to make my way prosperous. That was hard for me. And I remember dropping my oldest son off to private school, pulling in the garage, and I closed the garage door. And when I tell the story, people are like, oh, I wasn't trying to kill myself. I was just that out of it that I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. What am I going to do? Because I was a significant contributor to my family. And I was as they say, I was sitting in my car in my feelings. And at the time, my pastor, she called me and she says, hey, I'm just checking on you. How are you doing? And I said, well, and then that's when I realized the car was still running. And I turned the car off and I talked to her. And in talking to her, one of the things that she told me, and this is some of the best advice that I've ever gotten, and I tell all business leaders this. She said, Gretchen, I believe that you have something good here. But what you need to do while you have a lot of downtime, you need to create every form, every document, every template that you can create, and then put it, back then we were putting them on flash drives. And you put it on a flash drive because when the business comes, you're not going to have time to create all these things. And I remember getting myself together and going in the house, washing my face, saying a prayer, and went in my office, and I just worked and I worked. And I did this for several weeks. And just as she said, one phone call, they asked for several different documents. And at one point I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. Then I remember the flash drive. And I go to the flash drive, I pull these documents up, I plug it in, and the rest is history. That's when the ball began to roll. And so that is one of the key stories. It's a pivotal moment in my career as a business owner, because it could have, the scale could have tilted either way. But having, and this is something else I talk about in the book, is having a mentor, having that trusted person that you can speak to, but that can also speak to you and give you instruction on how to move forward with the stage in life that you are. Because it's very important. You have layers in your life and you have different layers, but everybody's not in your inner circle. And you have to identify where those layers are. And as they are, then you put those people in those places and allow them to participate based on where they're located.
Mm-hmm. So that is sage advice that you just gave there with that example. And it made me think about the diversity in your background as far as the type of positions that you held. Because I find when I talk to people, they're on this one track and they don't always see how different opportunities can lead them to ultimately where they're going to go. So can you just talk to us about how your different experiences as a state administrator, you talked about being at the Juvenile Justice Department, but you started as an educator. How did all of those experiences come together for you to be this businesswoman and to know, for example, what documents to create?
Well, it's, forever ago when I came to USC, because I wanted to be an attorney. And that was all I ever wanted to do in my life, was to be an attorney. And that's how I lived my life. That's how I studied. And I'm one of the first professors that I met was Dr. Andrew J. Chisholm, and he called me into his office while I think I was a sophomore in college, and he said to me, he said, "You know why I called you in my office?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "Because you ask me too many questions every day." And he says, "I want you to come intern for me." Wow. And in interning for him at his office, I was introduced to working with children. Now, mind you, again, I'm going to be an attorney. That is the plight for my life. It wasn't, I had graduated from the university, attending law school, and I realized this ain't what the Lord would have me to do. I don't want to do this no more. I want to go play with the children every day. And so I was open to that, but a lot of as far as like the documentation and the forms and knowing that, I learned in Dr. Chisholm's office. I learned in his office. I learned, you go to law school, you learn a whole bunch of stuff that sometimes you may never use, but it definitely teaches you the tenacity to have. And so with that, I became very open, and our roads will always, for the most part, will end up at my grandfather. And my grandfather would say, "You just need to be willing to learn something new."
I love that.
If you're willing to learn something new, then you're never trapped in. And so anything that I did not know, it's an ongoing joke with my girlfriends. Before there was a 4G factor, there was a 3Gs. It was Google, God, and Gretchen. And so if I didn't know it, and if God didn't tell me, surely Google was. Although it's funny, it is how I live my life. It is how I live my life, and just being open and knowing that even though being an educator, I always knew that there was something outside of the classroom, outside of, just managing. Like my first job when I at Creighton Middle School, I managed an after school program. Not knowing 30 plus years down the road, I'd own an education company. Who would have thought? And people see me as an education or an after school expert. But starting there, and so being willing, and I think that you hit it on the head. Just, you may be an educator, you may be in the classroom now, and I know this is the last thing you probably want to hear. We don't want teachers outside the classroom. We want them to stay, but we know that good teachers become good administrators become good directors, and then they become excellent superintendents like yourself. So there is a path, and I think that being open to the path is critically important, but not only being open to the path, it's not just a path, it's your path. Because one of the things I always said, I'm not going to retire from state government. Well, I didn't know that it was going to send me home either. I should have been a little more pointed with my confession. But I was not, and they sent me right on home, and I did not retire from state government. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Oh, I love the fact that you share that, because sometimes we do end up having doors closed for us, right? And so when that door closed, the question then becomes, what am I going to do? I think at that point we need to look at another door or a window someplace else that we need to go. But all of that experience you had has come together. And so your book is really about a lifestyle, a transformative lifestyle, which I think you've given some hints around that so far. Talk to us about, why is this a transformative lifestyle for anyone that's going to pick up and read this book, but for women in particular?
Well, women, we have the biggest juggling act in America. We are the only group of people that do not get a get out of jail card for anything. We have to show up. I have to tell this story. So yesterday we had a student that got sick, and in my community sites, we have a limited staff. So when he got sick, I was the cleanup lady. And I kept saying, Lord, I can't get sick. I can't get sick. So I came home and I told my son what had happened. And I said, I cannot get sick. Because if I get sick, then what's going to happen? Who's going to take care of y'all? Who's going to take care of me? And he looked and said, Mom, we'll take care of you. I said, for a limited period of time. And so women, we don't get that. We don't get to check out as conveniently as others. And so when I think about the 4G factor, it is starting from the bottom of guts. Like, you have to, when you have that thing, or people will call me and say, Gretchen, God told me this, or I got a vision about that. And I said, well, you got to dig in. That's first of all, the guts it takes to say what it is that you're doing. That's first and foremost. And so as you travel through the 4Gs, or the ride of greatness, as you travel the ride of greatness, and I liken it to a roller coaster ride, it's up, it's down, and then when you get around that curve, normally you can look back and say, whoa, it wasn't so bad. And then you look ahead and you can see the end, and you can see the end in front of you. That's why it's transformative, because it starts with the gut. And then you got to dig in there and get that grit and say, you know what? Nope. I can't see what's happening, but I got to keep working. And then once you start to put things on paper and start to put things in place, that's when that grind comes in, because you got to dig it out and you got to lock in. My sweet prayers, when he's out there on that basketball court, and if he gets distracted, I say, lock in, brother. And I yell out, lock in. And that is what that grind is, where we lock in, because that grind is right at that curve of the roller coaster ride, where, okay, we're almost there, but at any point we are closer to starting over or closer to the end. So we have to lock in and make a decision that in this grind season, I'm going to lock in. I'm going to make it happen. I start to see glimpse of hope. I start to see glimpse of greatness. And then once you pass that piece of grind and you get to greatness, that's when you're like, wow, I can see the fruit of my labor. I can see my product. I can see my book. I see my book. I can see my business, my clothing line, whatever that thing is, you can see it. But here's the thing. When you get to greatness has to be maintained. Mm-hmm. You don't put greatness on autopilot. You still have to sharpen your tools. You still have to maintain that level of greatness, because otherwise you become status quo, and someone else will lock into the 4G factor and surpass you. And now you are, God forbid, a one-hit wonder or has been, and we're trying to figure out, your company doesn't make it past the 5-year mark, and that's because you got the greatness and was like, I've arrived. I got me an office, and I got 2 staff members and a laptop and a computer and some business cards, and baby, y'all invite me to your lunch. That's part of the that's only part of the thing. So you got to maintain it, and I say women it's important, because sometimes we find ourselves fighting against each other versus working with each other. And the beauty that I love about this podcast is that, you have come into our space here in Richland County and connected very well. And I see it where you're bringing in other women, other men, and that whole connectivity is important. But it's more important for the African American and the Black and brown women as we fight to maintain greatness and fight to even get the greatness sometimes. So, when we think 4G, just know it's not overnight. This is a process. I've been in business for 16 years. And I think it was probably year 10 or 12 where I actually finally got like a salary that mattered, that like I could see a difference in the bank account. It wasn't a tip, but it was like, yeah, I am worth my hire. And so that's what I want for the women that's going to read this book, the men that are going to read this book. And everybody may not have a business, but you may have the desire to expand in your career or go up to the next level. This book is going to tell you how to get there.
Oh, thank you, Gretchen. We actually bought the book. I have my own copy signed by you, so thank you. But also we bought a copy for our youngest daughter, because what you just shared is the thing that is missing, I think, sometimes for a lot of our young people, is they see success, but they don't always know what they have to do to get there, right? And then once you get there, as you just said, what got you there won't keep you there. You still have to produce. And so what are you working on now? Because you've produced the book, you've got the book out there, but I know, being that you're the 4G factor yourself, what are you currently working on? What can we expect next from councilwoman, business owner, mother extraordinaire, Gretchen Barron?
So I had to take a little break because I was up for re-election. So I had to take a little break here. So I'm now back re-engaging and promoting the book. We are out and doing August is going to be busy, doing lots of seminars and workshops, talking about the 4G factor and having people to actually walk through the book with me. Because after every chapter is a reflection, that's a good educator strategy. And so I will be, I'll be in Raleigh. I'm going to Kingstree, several local places. Going to Florida. So that's one thing that, because it's not just a book. And if you're gonna have a 4G lifestyle, then it's more about me having an audience with women and men and saying, let's dig in and let's unpack this all together. Another thing is, so I gave the book to my oldest son, and I said, I want you to read the book. And then Prez said, well, Mama, I want a copy of the book. And I gave him a copy of the book. And so he said to me, this would be a cool leadership book for children. And I created a leadership program for my education company that my students go through. And so Prez has a way of pushing his mama. And so I plan on taking the 4G factor and really putting it in a package that will be fruitful for elementary, middle school, and high school students to be able to just kind of walk through the 4G. And then I'm considering there's a 5G that has come out of a conversation with one of my girlfriends. So I'm thinking that I may pen a book about the 4G, but there are other series. I want to stay in the leadership mode right now, but there are some other workbooks, a nonprofit book that I have. It's pretty much done. I just don't want it to get lost in the sauce with things, but it's a workbook on how to start a 501c3. And then once you start your 501c3, what do you do with it? And so we'll be probably in the next 8 months or so releasing that book along with some other fun projects. But the 4G is just getting started. It's just getting started real good.
Well, I would say the 4G has already started. It's just now being put out there for everybody else to benefit from, because it's already evident in you that the 4G factor is a lifestyle that will produce results if you follow the process and do what it is that you're committing to do. So I am very excited, Gretchen, for these other documents. And I just have to say, I love Prez pushing you to do more. And he's right. It would be a great opportunity to enhance our young adults, because they are the young adults. They're not technically adults, and we still think of them as kids, but that middle school range is really, where kids form their identity of who they are going to be. and what a large impact, something that will structure that process for them. I could see that having a significant impact. So I'm going to be excited to see that when you roll that out. So thank you. I just want to say thank you for being a guest today on our podcast. And I want to say to our supporters and subscribers, thank you for tuning in to today's episode. It was indeed an honor, and I hope you can see a privilege to have Gretchen Barron with us today. Her insights into the 4G factor, and maybe it'll be 4G plus 5, but for right now, it's the 4G factor. And her grit, her guts, and grind journey has been inspiring. So Gretchen's dedication to personal growth and community impact, it shines through every story that she shares with us in her book, but also that she shared today. And as you know, this podcast is dedicated to growth, because growth doesn't happen by accident. It has to be intentional. So from her impact in education and the juvenile justice areas to her pivotal role in government, Gretchen has exemplified what it means to lead with heart and purpose. So her book isn't just a guide. It is a testament to living a life of excellence and commitment. So remember, grab your copy of the 4G Factor. You can get it on Amazon. And once you do, I want to give you some homework. I want you to immerse yourself in the transformative principles that Gretchen has so eloquently laid out in her book, The 4G Factor. You will see that her passion and dedication to fostering greatness, well, it's really infectious. And I am sure that you will find as much value in her book as we did in our conversation today. So stay tuned to our next episode, where we will continue to equip you with research-based and experientially learned educational leadership practices and principles that promote student success. So until then, keep leading, stay committed to your growth, as well as remember, guts, grit, and grind produce greatness. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.